It is late. I don't know what time exactly. I stopped keeping clocks in the bedroom some years back because they made the nights feel like something I was supposed to get through, like a test, and I am too old now to think of nights that way. They are just nights. They happen, and then they stop happening, and the morning comes. Or it doesn't. I am sitting in the chair by the window, the one with the armrests that have gone soft on one side from all the years of my elbow resting there. Outside, there is a streetlight and a tree, and that is about all there is. The street is empty. It has been empty for hours. I want to tell you something. I want to tell you what happened, or what I think happened, or what I know now that I didn't know then, which is most of it. I'm not sure I can do it in any kind of order. My mind doesn't work in order anymore. It works in circles, the way water moves when you put your hand in it and then pull your hand away. Everything ripples and spreads and comes back to the center. The center, for me, is Marcus. It has been Marcus for a long time, long before the phone call, long before Hawaii, long before I understood that a man can grieve the living just as hard as he grieves the dead, and maybe harder, because with the dead you at least have the mercy of not being able to imagine what they're doing on a Tuesday afternoon, where they are, whether they ever think of you. But I am getting ahead of myself. That is the problem with circles. You are always somewhere in the middle of something, even when you think you are at the beginning. Let me try to start with the phone call. It was a Thursday in October. I know it was October because the light was that particular thin October light that comes through the window sideways and makes everything look a little older than it is. I was heating up some soup. Nothing important, just soup from a can. And the phone rang, and I almost didn't answer it because I don't answer numbers I don't recognize anymore. Not since the world decided that every stranger with a phone was someone trying to take something from you. But something made me pick it up. Her voice was the first thing. Tamara's voice, my daughter-in-law, and even in that first second before she said a word, I knew something was wrong. Not because she sounded upset, because she didn't. She sounded careful. The way a person sounds when they have rehearsed what they are about to say, when they have practiced the right amount of tremble. She said, "Mr. Elias," and then she paused. And then she said, "I'm so sorry to have to tell you this. Your son drowned in Hawaii. He went out swimming 3 days ago, and they found him. 3 days. She waited 3 days to call me." I didn't say that out loud. I stood there by the stove with the phone against my face and the soup starting to bubble, and I said, "What do you mean, drowned?" And she said there was an accident. He went out too far. They searched, and they found him. And I said, "When?" And she said, 3 days ago. And I said, "You waited 3 days." And she said she was in shock. She was barely holding on herself. She hoped I understood. I said I needed to come to Hawaii. I said I needed to see him. She said, "That's the thing, Mr. Ellis. I already had him cremated. I know that's sudden. I know. But it's what he wanted. He'd told me before. I had him cremated, and his ashes are here with me, and we can arrange something, a service, whatever you need." I stood there. The soup was boiling over. I stood there, and I heard what she was telling me, and something in me, something old and stubborn that I've had since I was a young man in Georgia, with nothing but bad luck and good instincts. Something in me said no, not no to the grief. The grief came. It came like a wave, like something physical. It moved up from my stomach and into my chest, and I had to put my hand on the counter to keep myself standing. My son. The word kept arriving, and arriving in my head. My son. The word that had been complicated for 40 years, the word that had joy in it, and failure in it, and love in it, and the particular ache of all the things I never said. But underneath the grief, that stubborn thing in me said, no, this is not right, because Marcus could swim. That is the thing nobody who didn't know him would understand, but it is the thing I understood from the very beginning. From the first second she said the word drowned. Marcus could swim the way some men can breathe. It was the one thing in his life that had always been entirely his, entirely natural, entirely without effort. He won his first junior championship when he was 11 years old. He swam in college. He swam competitively until his early 30s, and then he kept swimming, just because it was what he was. It was part of his body, the way a heartbeat is part of your body. I put him in that pool. I know that. I put him in that pool when he was 5 years old, and I picked him up and carried him to the edge and set him down in the water. And he cried. He cried for about 30 seconds, and then he started swimming. That was Marcus. He cried, and then he did the thing. He had Eleanor's legs, long, easy legs, good for a kick. From me, he got the shoulders and the lungs. I am not a swimmer, but I am a big man, and he got the frame from me, the capacity for sustained effort, the particular stubbornness that looks like strength from the outside and is something more complicated from the inside. From the inside, it is just the inability to stop, the inability to say this is enough, I can rest now, I have done what was needed. He could hold his breath for an extraordinary amount of time. I used to time him when he was young, in that same municipal pool, standing at the edge with my watch while he held himself under. Eleanor used to tell me to stop doing it. She said it made her anxious. She said she didn't want to stand there watching her child be still underwater. I told her it was a skill. I told her it would serve him. She gave me the look she reserved for the things I was wrong about and said I suppose so. She was right to be nervous, not because anything bad happened, but because there was something in it, in the way I timed him, that was not quite about swimming. It was about performance. It was about measurement. I could not be in the water with him, so I stood at the edge and I measured. I gave him the number, how long he'd been under, and the number was the thing that passed between us. The number was our language, and he accepted that. He took the number and went back under and came up, and I gave him a new number, and that was how we communicated for a great many years. He got very good at holding his breath. He got very good at being still and contained and underwater, while the world went on at the surface without him. I'm not saying I understand everything. I'm not saying I can trace every line from where I stood to where he ended up. But I am saying that when I think about a man who decides to disappear so completely from his life that he lets himself be declared dead, who goes under and stays under and does not come back up, I recognize something in that. I recognize the particular discipline of it, the training. I recognize it because I taught him how to hold still. But I am getting ahead of myself. That is the problem with circles. I was a young man in Georgia when Marcus was born. I was 34, which is not young exactly, but I was young in the sense of being unfinished, still working out what kind of man I was going to be, still carrying my own father in my chest like a stone I hadn't found the right place to set down. My father was a man from rural Alabama who had come north in the 50s looking for work and found it, found hard, ugly work that paid enough to raise 4 children in a house with 2 bedrooms and no joy to speak of. He was not a bad man. He was tired. He was tired in a way that I did not fully understand until I was tired too, 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 until I was had my own child and my own house and my own job that required everything I had and left little over for the softness. But my father never showed his love, and so I didn't know how. That is the simple, ugly truth of it. It was in him, I believe that now. I believe he loved us, but it was not the kind of love that reached toward you. It was the kind that stayed inside its own body and hoped you could feel it through some other means, through the bills being paid, through the roof not leaking, through the simple continuing presence of a man who showed up every day to a life he had not exactly chosen. I felt it through those means. I felt it, and I passed it on the same way. But I am getting ahead of myself again. The swimming was his. I pointed him toward the water, and he took it and made it into something that had nothing to do with me, or very little to do with me. He swam past anything I ever pushed him toward. He swam past my voice, past my expectations, past the weekends I spent hollering at him from the pool deck as if yelling at a child is the same as teaching one. He got good enough that coaches started calling me, not the other way around. He got good enough that I had to stop pretending the swimming was my idea. The swimming was Marcus. And so when she said drowned, something in me understood immediately that the water would not have taken him. Not in Hawaii, not anywhere. The water was his home. I have watched that man swim in ocean currents that would have swallowed most people whole and come out of it looking rested. I have watched him dive under waves that I couldn't have even walked toward and emerge 20 yards down the beach like he'd stepped through a door that the water had opened just for him. The water didn't take him. I didn't say any of this to Tamara. I said I was very sorry. I said I appreciated her calling. I said I would be in touch about a memorial. And then I hung up the phone, and I turned off the burner, and I stood in my kitchen for a long time looking at the wall. The grief was real. I want to be clear about that. Whatever else I knew or didn't know, the grief was real. Because even if Marcus was not dead, something was dead. Something had ended. Some version of my son had been killed by the fact that he needed to be dead, needed to make himself gone. And I understood, even in that early hour, that whatever I was about to discover would cost me more than a simple death would have. A simple death I could have survived. I have survived deaths. I have buried my mother and my wife and two of my closest friends, and I am still here in this chair by this window, which tells you something about the particular stubbornness of old men who have run out of most other qualities. But this was not going to be a simple death. I knew it the way you know weather. Before the rain comes, there is something in the air, a pressure, a heaviness that has nothing to do with clouds. You feel it in the place behind your eyes. I felt it, standing in my kitchen with the empty soup pot and the October light going sideways across the floor. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in this same chair, and I let the grief do what it needed to do. I let it move through me. And while it moved, I started thinking, the way I used to think when I was a younger man, and thinking was still something I did with any precision. The cremation. That was the thing that settled in me like a stone. 3 days, and she had him cremated. Now, I understand people have different ways of handling loss. I understand that shock makes people do things that look strange from the outside. But Tamara was not a woman who made decisions quickly or alone. In 22 years of knowing her, she was a woman who researched, who consulted, who made lists. She would not have stood in a funeral home in Honolulu 3 days after finding out her husband drowned and said, "Yes, please, take him," unless the point was to make sure there was nothing left to examine. Unless the point was that there had never been a body. I didn't want to think it. I want you to understand that I resisted that thought with everything I had, because following that thought meant something about my son that I did not want to be true. It meant Marcus had chosen this, had planned this, had looked at his life and decided that disappearing from it was better than living in it. And I could not help but sit in that chair and ask myself, how much of that is about me? How much of a man's need to vanish from his own life comes from the way his father stood at the edge of a pool and hollered instead of wading in? I don't know when I fell asleep. I woke up in the chair with the morning light in my face and my back aching, and the feeling you get sometimes when you've been dreaming something important and you can't remember what it was, just the weight of it, just the aftershock. I called my nephew Raymond that morning. Raymond is the only person left in my life who I trust without thinking about it. He's in his 50s now, Raymond, my sister's boy, but when he was small, he used to follow me around like I was something. I don't know what I was to him. Something. He became a good man, regardless of what I modeled for him, which I think says more about Raymond than it does about me. I told Raymond what Tamara had told me, and Raymond said, "Unc, drowned." And I said, "That's what she said." And Raymond was quiet for a moment, and then he said, "Marcus can swim." And I said, "Yes." And Raymond said, "I'm coming over." He came over, and we sat at my kitchen table, and I told him the rest of it, the cremation, the 3 days, all of it. And Raymond listened the way he always listens, with his whole face, with his whole body leaned slightly forward, which is something his mother used to do too. And when I finished, he said, "What do you want to do?" I said, "I want to know the truth." He said, "Okay." And he pulled out his phone and started making calls. What followed was several weeks of the strangest kind of work I have ever done. Raymond found a man, a private investigator, a quiet, serious Jamaican man named Denton, who worked out of Miami and who had, Raymond said, done this sort of thing before, found people who did not want to be found. I paid him what he asked without negotiating, because I am too old to negotiate, and because some things you do not want to get the discount version of. Denton flew to Honolulu. He was there for a week. In that week, I went about my life the way you go about a life that has had something knocked out of it. I ate. I slept a little. I watched the street from this window. I thought about Marcus. I thought about Marcus at 6 years old, the way he used to come into the kitchen in the morning and stand next to me while I cooked and not say anything, just stand there, just be near. I don't know what he was waiting for, maybe just for me to notice him, maybe just for me to say something warm. I was not a man who said warm things easily. I was raised by a man who didn't say them at all, and you pass on what you have, even when you know better, even when you can see yourself doing it and wish you weren't. I thought about Marcus at 12, when I came to his swim meet late. I came late because I was finishing something at work, because I always had something at work that needed finishing, because work was the one place where I understood what was expected of me. I came in during the last heat and I watched him finish, and he came out of the pool looking for me. And when he found me in the bleachers, his face did a thing. It closed, the way a door closes, not a slam, just a quiet click. I waved at him. He waved back. We drove home and talked about nothing in particular. He never told me what that look meant. I never asked. We were very good at not asking. I thought about Marcus at 24, just out of college, when he told me he was going to work in marine biology, was going to do something with the ocean, and I said, and what does that pay? Not because I cared about the money. I didn't need him to make money. I was being careful with him the way I was always careful with him, which is the wrong kind of careful, not the kind that protects someone, the kind that keeps distance. He didn't become a marine biologist. He went into business, something with technology, something I never fully understood. He did well at it. He bought a nice house in Portland. He married Tamara, who was a serious woman with careful eyes that I always felt were evaluating me and finding me short of something, though maybe that was just guilt on my part. They came to visit once a year at Christmas. We sat at this same table and ate food and talked about things that weren't the things we meant. Marcus would help me with things around the house, changing light bulbs, checking the gutters, things like that. And we would work side by side in a kind of silence that was comfortable and unbearable at the same time. Comfortable because it was what we knew. Unbearable for the same reason. He had one child with Tamara, a girl named Senna. She was 7 when Tamara called me. She has her father's eyes, dark and deep and a little watchful, and when she looked at me, I sometimes felt she was seeing something nobody else could see, the way children sometimes can. Denton called me on a Wednesday evening from Honolulu. He said he had found some things. He said there was no official drowning report matching Marcus's description from that week. He said the hotel where Tamara claimed they were staying had a record of a reservation under her name, not his. He said that the cremation, when he traced it, had involved paperwork with irregularities he wouldn't go into on the phone. He said he wanted to come back to the mainland and talk in person. I said, "Can you tell me one thing before you come?" He said, "I can try." I said, "Is my son alive?" There was a pause, not a long one, just enough. He said, "I think so." I sat with that for a long time after I hung up. I sat with it the way you sit with something that is too big to hold all at once, that you have to approach in pieces. My son was alive. My son was not drowned. My son had arranged for the world to think he was dead. I thought about Eleanor. I thought about her in the particular way I have thought about her since she died, which is not as a whole person, but as the accumulation of moments. A blue coat she wore to church for 15 years. The sound she made when she laughed at something genuinely funny. A a sound that was more surprise than amusement, like she was always a little astonished that something could be that good. The way she looked at Marcus when she thought no one was watching, with a total, uncomplicated love that she never felt she had to perform or explain. She would have known what to do. That is what I thought, sitting by the window that night after Denton called. Eleanor would have known what to do. She would have sat across from me in this room and looked at me with those quiet eyes and said, "Augustus, here is what needs to happen." She had a way of seeing clearly through situations that I was too much inside of to see straight. She was the lens I used to focus when everything blurred. Without her, I have been working mostly on instinct, which is to say, mostly on stubbornness. I thought about the last real conversation Marcus and I had, not the most recent phone call, the Christmas calls, the maintenance. I mean the last time we said something true to each other. I have spent a lot of time trying to remember it, and I keep coming back to the same answer, which is that I don't know. I don't know when it was. That might be the saddest thing I have to say tonight. Sadder than the disappearance, sadder than Hawaii, sadder than the urn on whatever shelf. I don't know the last time my son and I spoke truly to each other. There was a moment when he was about 15 that comes close. He had lost a race, a big one, regional, championships, and in the car on the way home, he was quiet in the specific way of a teenager who is carrying something and doesn't know if you're safe to give it to. I was driving. I was looking at the road, and he said, "I don't know why I do this anymore." He wasn't talking about swimming, or maybe he was, and also more than swimming. 15-year-olds speak in translations like that, saying the surface thing while meaning the thing underneath it. I should have turned toward him then. I should have pulled the car over and turned toward him and said, "Tell me," just that. "Tell me." What I said instead was, "You do it because you're good at it." And he said, "Yeah." And we drove the rest of the way home in quiet. And I made dinner and we ate it, and that was that. But I know now that what he was trying to ask me was something different. He was trying to ask me if the thing had value separate from the performance of it. Whether I would still want him to swim if he lost, whether I would still be interested in him, still present in the car with him on the way home, if he wasn't the boy with the ribbons and the times. He was asking if I loved the swimmer or the boy, and I answered about the swimmer. The grief shifted. It didn't go away. It changed shape. It became something denser and stranger. Grief that was also something else, something I don't have the right word for, which is the feeling you get when you understand that someone you love has looked at the life they share with you and chosen to exit it. Not through death, through disappearance, through the decision that being gone, even fictionally gone, even dead in everyone's eyes, was preferable to being present. I cried that night, not the way I cried at my wife's funeral, which was a public, formal kind of grief, the grief of a man performing grief in front of other people and also genuinely feeling it. I cried the way I cried when I was a boy, which is to say, alone and quietly, the way you cry when you've been taught that crying is something to be done privately and quickly and then set aside. But I let it go on longer than usual. I was too old and too tired to stop it. Denton came to see me the following week. He sat in the chair across from this one, and he put a folder on the table between us, and he spoke quietly and precisely, like a man who has learned to deliver hard information without inflection. He had found Marcus, not in Hawaii, in New Mexico, in a small city outside of Albuquerque, in a house with a woman named Clara and a boy who was approximately 18 months old. Marcus was using a different name. He had different identification, which Denton did not explain how he had obtained, but which suggested planning. Long planning. Not weeks. Months. Maybe more. He was working. Something quiet. Something with his hands, Denton thought, though he hadn't gotten close enough to be certain. He looked healthy. He looked, Denton said. And then he paused and chose his word carefully. He looked lighter, lighter. I've thought about that word for months now. What it means. What it says about the weight my son was carrying, that when he shed everyone who knew him, everyone who loved him, he looked lighter. What part of that weight came from me? I asked Denton to leave the folder. He left it. I didn't open it that day. I put it on the table and I made myself a cup of coffee, and I sat by the window. The tree outside was fully bare by then. November, all the leaves gone. The streetlight made the bare branches look like something drawn in pencil. I opened the folder the next morning. There was a photograph. It was taken from some distance, a long lens, the kind of photograph that is technically an intrusion, but that I found I couldn't feel guilty about. Not then. It showed a man standing in a yard. He was in profile, slightly turned away, looking at something off to the left of the frame. He was wearing a plain shirt. His shoulders were relaxed. I looked at that photograph for a long time. It was Marcus. It was unmistakably Marcus. He has my father's build, the same broad back, the same particular way of standing with his weight slightly forward, like he's always about to move towards something. He got that from the blood. You can't practice a posture like that. It's in the spine. He looked different in the way that people look different when they have stopped performing themselves, when they have stopped maintaining the version of themselves that other people need them to be. He looked less finished, if that makes sense, less assembled. He looked like a man who had finally let himself be rough around the edges. He looked like someone I might have been able to talk to if I had known how to talk to people. I looked at his hands in the photograph. They were blurred slightly, the distance and the lens, but they were large hands. He always had large hands. Eleanor used to say his hands looked like they were built for some other body, some bigger body, that hadn't arrived yet. When he was a swimmer, those hands were his best tool, the way he could pull through the water with those hands, reaching and pulling, reaching and pulling. I thought about what those hands were doing now, what work they were doing, whatever Denton had seen that suggested something with his hands. I thought about a man with a different name doing work with his hands in a yard in New Mexico, and I tried to understand what that life looked like from the inside, whether it was quieter, whether the nights were different, whether he thought about his daughter. That is the question that surfaces every time and that I cannot get past. Every time I circle the fact of his disappearance, I come back to Senna. Every time. Because I can build a story around a man who needed to leave his marriage, who needed to leave a life that had become something he couldn't breathe inside. I have seen that. I understand that people reach points where the options are leave or stop being themselves. I cannot call that cowardice with any conviction, because I have been in rooms that felt like that, and I stayed, yes, but staying almost killed me too. But Senna, a 7-year-old girl who held my hand at her father's memorial, there is no story I can build around that doesn't have a hole in the middle. I have tried. I have tried to imagine the version of events where leaving her was something Marcus had to do, where the mathematics of his survival required it, where the alternative was some worse version of him remaining and doing her damage. I cannot get there, or I can get close to it, and then I see her face, those dark, watchful eyes that are his eyes, and I have to put the story down. Maybe that is my failing, and not his. Maybe there are kinds of pain I don't have the imagination to enter, because I've never been that kind of desperate. Maybe what it takes to walk away from your child is a level of desperation that a man like me, a stubborn man, a maintaining man, a man who stays through everything, even when staying is its own form of damage, has no access to understanding. Maybe. I think about it. I think about Tamara, too. I've done her a disservice in my thinking. I know that. I've put her in the role of the person who helped him and taken money for it and moved on, and maybe that's true. But there is another possibility that has started to feel more true to me the longer I sit with it, which is that Tamara was also left, that she was told enough of the story to be useful, given a number and a reason, and told that this was happening whether she helped or not. And she made the choice a person makes when they are exhausted and trapped and someone offers them a door. Maybe she is also sitting in a house at night, looking at a shelf, carrying what she knows. Maybe she is also making it up as she goes, telling her daughter a story about water and peace and the ocean that swam through her father's blood, trying to make it beautiful enough that the girl can hold it. Maybe we are two old people, she and I, both carrying the same secret in different houses, and neither of us will ever be able to put it down, because putting it down would mean doing something with it, and there is nothing to do. I thought about calling her, not to confront, just to say, I know, to say, I'm not going to do anything with it, to say, how are you? I didn't call. That is also a pattern, knowing what I should do and not doing it, not out of cruelty, out of some calcified inability to reach, the same inability I had in the kitchen, in the car, at the pool deck, at the reception after Eleanor's funeral, the same inability I have had since I was a boy watching my own father sit in a chair and say nothing, learning that silence was what men did when they had something to say. There was a summer when Marcus was 8, when Eleanor took him to visit her sister in South Carolina for 2 weeks. I had to work. I always had to work. And for 2 weeks, the house was empty. And I came home to the empty house every night and ate alone and watched television and went to bed in the quiet, and I told myself I was fine. I told myself the quiet was a rest. What I actually felt underneath the managing was something I didn't have words for then and barely have words for now, which is the specific loneliness of a man who has people who love him and has kept them at a careful distance. And then one day the distance does its job and they are gone, and the house shows him exactly what his choices have been building toward. When they came back, I was so relieved I didn't know what to do with it. Eleanor walked in the door with a tan, and her sister's easy laugh still on her face, and Marcus came in behind her with sand in his sneakers from the beach, and I stood in the kitchen, and I felt something open in my chest that I immediately closed again because I didn't know what to do with that kind of feeling. I hugged them. I made dinner. I asked about the trip. We were back in our arrangement within an hour. I never told Eleanor how the 2 weeks had felt. I never told her how much the empty house had said to me. I think if I had told her, if I had let her see that, she would have held it gently. She would have looked at me with those quiet eyes, and she would have understood that I was a man who needed his people close and didn't know how to keep them that way, and she would have helped me. She helped me with everything else. She helped me be more than what my father gave me to start with. But I didn't tell her, and so she couldn't help with that one. She couldn't help me with Marcus either, not fully, because I never told her the full scope of what I didn't know how to do. She saw the surface version, the awkwardness at the pool, the missed moments, the conversations that went sideways and then stopped. She tried to smooth those things. She was always translating between us, offering context, saying, Augustus, I think what Marcus was trying to say was. But she was working with what I gave her, which wasn't everything. And when she was gone, There was no more translation, just two men, and all the words between them that had never become sentences. I thought about calling him. I thought about it for weeks, in that active, desperate way you think about doing something that you know you shouldn't do. I would sit here and construct the conversation in my head. What I would say when he answered, how I would explain that I knew, what I would ask. I ran through dozens of versions. They all ended the same way, with silence on the other end of the line, with the sound of a man who has already said everything he needs to say, and said it by disappearing. I thought about going to New Mexico. I thought about standing outside that house and waiting for him to come out and just looking at him, not saying anything, just letting him see me, letting him know that I had found him, that you cannot simply erase yourself from the life of a man who loves you even when that man has never been particularly good at showing it. But then I thought about what that would do to him. I thought about Senna. That child believes her father is dead. Her grandfather, meaning me, has spoken to her twice since the phone call, brief phone calls with Tamara carefully present in the background, and both times Senna has been so quiet that the calls felt like holding a thread that was about to break. She is 7 years old, and she believes her father drowned in Hawaii, and his ashes are in an urn in Portland, and she will carry that for the rest of her life. I don't know what Tamara told her. I don't know if Tamara knows where Marcus is, whether this was genuinely collaborative, or whether Tamara was simply told enough to perform the role and paid enough to keep it. That thought that Tamara might also be a kind of victim in this, that Marcus might have left her too, that he might have left everyone, sits with me sometimes in a particular way. A man who leaves everything. A man who needed to leave so badly that he left his daughter. That is the thing I cannot get around. I understand. I have come to understand, in the way you come to understand things you resist, why he might have needed to leave me. I can trace the genealogy of that need back through 20 years of careful distance, of conversations that never became what they should have been, of a father who stood at the edge of a pool and hollered and called it teaching. I can understand all of that. But Senna did not make him carry any weight. Senna was 7 years old and loved her father with the complete, uncomplicated love that small children give before they learn better. And he left her. I don't understand that. I have tried. Maybe there was something in the marriage I never knew about. Something that made him feel like leaving Senna was part of leaving Tamara, like you couldn't separate them. Maybe he told himself she would be better off with the story of a father who drowned than the reality of a father who vanished. Maybe he intends to come back for her someday when he's ready, which is the kind of thinking that men do when they are not thinking clearly, when they are only thinking about getting out of the water. I have been in that water. I know what it feels like to be drowning in your own life and to look around for the exit. The difference between us is that I stayed. I don't say that with pride. I want to be careful about that. I stayed, yes, I stayed, and I raised my son, and I provided, and I was present in all the ways that can be counted and measured. I came home at night. I paid the bills. I fixed the car. I showed up. But there is a kind of staying that is just another form of leaving. You stay in the house, but you leave the room. You are at the table, but you are somewhere else in your mind. You are looking at your child, but you are not seeing him. You are answering when spoken to, but you are not listening in the way that people need to be listened to, which is not just with your ears, but with your whole attention, with the willingness to be actually affected by what the other person is saying. My wife understood this about me. Eleanor understood it better than I did, and she was gentle about it in a way that I only recognized as gentleness after she was gone. While she was alive, it just felt like part of our arrangement, like she covered the warmth and I covered the structure, and together we made something that worked. What I didn't understand was that she was also covering for my failures with Marcus. She was the one who went to his meets even when I was late. She was the one who sat with him after a hard loss and didn't say anything, just sat there, which is apparently what he needed, which is apparently what I never could figure out how to do. Eleanor died when Marcus was 28. Breast cancer. It took 2 years, and it was not a kind 2 years. And when it was over, Marcus and I were left alone with each other for the first time, without her to translate between us. We stood at her grave in our good coats in the cold, and we were 2 men who shared blood and a language and a history, and we had almost nothing to say to each other that she hadn't been the medium for. He held my arm during the burial. That is the most physical contact we'd had in years, maybe a decade. He held my arm, and I could feel how strong he was, swimmer's strength, and I thought, this is my son. This man is my son. And I felt the weight of all the years between us like something physical, like the water he was so good at moving through. We didn't talk much at the reception. People kept coming up to me with their condolences and their covered dishes and their kind intentions, and I thanked them, and I let them fold me into their sympathy. I looked across the room at Marcus a few times, and he was standing at the window with a drink in his hand, looking out, and his face was the same face I'd seen at 12, at the pool, that closed door. I should have gone to him. I know that. I've known it for 20 years, since the day it happened. I should have gone to him and stood next to him at that window and said something real. Not something managed, not something appropriate, something real, which might have been, I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to be with you now that she's gone. I have loved you from a distance for so long that I don't know how to be close. I don't know how to start. I didn't say any of that. I thanked another neighbor for the casserole, and I watched my son standing at the window, and eventually he put down his drink and came over and said he had to get back. Tamara was tired. The trip home was long. He hugged me, a brief, formal hug, the kind you give a person you respect but do not quite know. He drove away. I stood on the porch for a moment watching the car go. Not long, just long enough for the cold to remind me that I was standing outside without a coat. Then I went in and washed the dishes from the reception and turned off the kitchen light and went to bed. That is what I did on the night of the day I buried Eleanor. I washed the dishes. I lay in the bed with her side empty beside me, and I thought methodically about what needed to be done in the coming week. Insurance, bank accounts, the car title, her clothes, which I would deal with later, not yet. I lay there and made a list in my head, and then I slept, because sleeping is something I have always been able to do, even when I shouldn't be able to. It is either a gift or another form of the same problem. I did not think about Marcus. On the night of his mother's funeral, lying in the bed that still held the shape of her on her side of the mattress, I did not think about my son, did not wonder if he was sleeping in that hotel room across town or staring at the ceiling, did not wonder what the grief was doing to him or whether he needed anything from me, anything at all, even just the knowledge that I was awake and thinking of him. I did not call him. He called me 6 days later. Just checking in, he said. His voice was careful. It had been careful for years. I said I was managing. He said, let me know if you need anything. I said I would. We talked for 11 minutes. I know because I looked at the call log afterward, the way you look at evidence. 11 minutes. His mother had been dead for less than a week. I have to be honest about this, here, at the end of things, in the quiet of this room. I have to be honest, because the dishonest version would be more comfortable, but it would also be the old habit, the managing, the maintenance, and I am done with that. The honest version is that I was the same man after Eleanor died that I had been before she died, which is to say I was not capable of opening toward my son when he needed me to open, and he was not capable of asking, and we were both men trained in the same silence, and we maintained it until he finally did the only thing he could figure out how to do, which was to stop maintaining anything at all. For the next 14 years, we saw each other at Christmas and spoke on the phone every few weeks. The calls were reasonable. We talked about his work, my health, the news, Senna's school performances. We were two men maintaining a relationship with reasonable effort and no particular hunger. I told myself this was fine. I told myself this was how it was between fathers and adult sons, that you didn't need to be intimate. That presence and reliability were enough. I wonder now if he was already planning by then. If there were years of accumulation behind his eyes when we spoke on the phone, years of tallying up what the life was costing him against what it was giving him, until one day the numbers didn't add up anymore. I wonder if he ever almost told me. I wonder if there were moments in those phone calls when he was close to saying something real, when he came to the edge of it, and I said something about the news or my health, and the moment closed and he moved away from it, and we finished the call the way we always finished it, with everything unspoken intact. I have held the telephone in my hand many times since Denton showed me that photograph, and I have thought about dialing the number that Denton found, the number for the house in New Mexico, a number for a man who is not called Marcus anymore, but who is my son, who learned to move through water before he was old enough to lose a tooth. I have not dialed it. I don't know if that makes me wise or cowardly. I have gone back and forth on it many times. There is a version of this where I call him, and he answers, and my voice is the thing that brings him back, like a lamp in a window, like he was just waiting for permission. There is another version where I call him, and he hangs up and changes the number, and the last remaining thread is cut. I cannot afford the second version. I am 79 years old, and I do not have the constitution for it. So I sit here, and I carry the knowledge of it the way you carry something you cannot put down and cannot show anyone. Raymond knows, Denton knows, no one else, not Tamara, not Senna, not any of the friends and extended family who came to the small memorial we held for Marcus in Portland in December, who stood in a circle in a park near the water and said things about what a good man he was, what a gentle soul, how much he had loved that ocean. He is still alive. On the days when that is a comfort, I close my eyes and I find him in my mind the way Denton's photograph left him, standing in a yard in New Mexico, in a plain shirt with his shoulders relaxed, looking at something I cannot see. I give him good weather. I give him a moment of peace. I tell myself that wherever he is, whatever name he is wearing now, there is something in him that swam free. There is something in him that got out of the undertow. On the days when it is not a comfort, I think about Senna. I think about her growing up with that story inside her. Her father drowned. Her father is in an urn. Her father was taken by the ocean he loved. And I think about Marcus building a new life while his daughter grieves him, and I cannot make those two images fit together into a picture of a man I recognize. I keep trying. I keep picking up the pieces and rearranging them. I think about the money. Whatever Tamara was paid, if she was paid at all, or what she received from insurance, from whatever financial arrangements Marcus made before he became someone else. I think about the planning it took, the months of it, the documents, the new name, the story about Hawaii, the woman named Clara, the child 18 months old. which means Marcus was already somewhere else in his mind long before he told Tamara anything, long before he made any phone calls, long before the vacation that wasn't a vacation. Where was he in his mind during those Christmas dinners? I see him at my table now, and I look at him differently than I did then, in the way you look at old photographs and notice things you missed when the moment was happening. Was he already counting down? Was he already somewhere in New Mexico, in his imagination, already lighter, already free of the careful life we'd all built around him and for him, and that apparently had been pressing down on him like water over a diver? Did he look at me across this table and feel pity, or something harder than pity? I was not a cruel man. I want that on record, though I'm not sure who I'm saying it to or why the record matters at this point. I was not cruel. I did not raise my hand to him, ever. I did not take things from him or deny him things or make him feel small in the ways that men sometimes make their children feel small out of their own need to feel large. I was not that, but I was cold. Not cold the way winter is cold. Cold the way a house can be cold when the heat isn't working, when it's just a little below comfortable, just enough that you're always aware of it, always slightly contracted against it. Not dramatic, just a persistent low-level cold that you eventually stop hoping will get warm. That is what I gave him. My father gave it to me, and I passed it on the way you pass things on without meaning to, without even knowing your hands are on the thing. My father was a man who worked hard and provided and came home and sat in a chair and said very little, and that was what a father looked like to me, and so that was what I became. And Marcus sat across from that version of fatherhood for 18 years and then went away to college and then came back at Christmas and looked at me across a table and never said a word about it. Because we didn't say words about it. Because the silence was the thing we both maintained. Both of us. It takes two people to keep a silence that total. I should have broken it. I am the father. I should have been the one to break it. That is the thing that stays with me most, the most persistent regret among the several regrets I have taken to bed with me every night for the past several months. I was the adult. Even when he was an adult too, I was the father, and the father has a responsibility that doesn't expire, and I let the silence continue year after year because breaking it felt dangerous and because I did not want to learn what was behind it. Maybe I was afraid of exactly this. Maybe some part of me knew that if we ever really talked, if we ever cleared the ground between us, I would find out just how much distance he had needed to put between us in his heart. How long ago he had already left. The pool. I keep coming back to the pool. He was 5 years old, and I picked him up, and I carried him to the edge, and I set him down in the water. And I've told myself for 74 years that what I did next, which was step back and tell him to swim, was a form of belief in him, a form of confidence, a way of saying, I know you can do this. But standing here now in the late night with the streetlight and the bare tree, I wonder if it was simpler than that. I wonder if I stepped back because standing at the edge and reaching in, getting my own hands wet, getting in with him, was something I did not know how to do. I did not know how to get in the water with him. I knew how to stand on deck and shout instructions. I knew how to time his laps and note his improvements and tell him when he wasn't fast enough. I knew how to drive him to meets and sit in bleachers and make the appropriate sounds when he won, which I will say, I did go to the meets. Most of them. I was there most of the time. I want that counted for something. But I did not get in the water. There was a day, I think he was 9 or 10, when he asked me to swim with him. We were at a public pool, one of those big municipal pools with the lanes marked off, and after his practice, he asked me if I wanted to get in and swim with him. and I said I had some things to get done, which was probably true. I usually had things, but he stood there at the edge of the pool with his goggles pushed up on his forehead and water running off him, and he watched me leave, and I did not turn back to look at him. I've turned back to look at him in my mind 1,000 times since. There was a version of me that turned around, that said, "You know what? Forget the errands. Let me go get changed." That got in the water with his son and swam around the pool in whatever clumsy approximation of swimming a non-swimmer can manage, and splashed and laughed the way fathers are supposed to laugh with their boys. That version of me is very clear in my head at certain times of the night. That version of me might have raised a different man. But that is not what happened. What happened is what almost always happened, which is that I chose the manageable thing over the thing that required me to be open and awkward and uncertain in front of my own child. That I maintained my composure, that I was dignified and useful and reliable, and never once in his childhood did I let him see me flailing, uncertain, reaching for something I didn't know how to hold. I think children need to see that. I think they need to see their fathers at a loss sometimes, need to understand that lostness is something adults feel too, is something you can feel and survive, is not a failure of character, but a feature of being alive. They need to see you reach for something and fall short and try again. He never saw me try again. He saw me not try at all. Tamara called me in late January. It was a brief call, routine in the way that calls between us have become routine since Marcus, since the memorial, since we became two people connected by the common fact of our grief, which is the loneliest kind of connection. She said Senna had been asking questions. She said Senna wanted to know if her grandfather would come visit. She said, "She misses you." I said I would come. I haven't gone yet. I've started 3 times and stopped. The drive to Portland, the empty room he had when he visited, the urn on whatever shelf she keeps it on. I'm not sure I can be in that house and look at that urn and know what I know and say nothing. But I think about Senna's face, her father's eyes, dark and deep and watchful, the way she sat next to me at the memorial and held my hand without being asked, just reached over and took my hand and held it. 7 years old, and already she knew something the adults hadn't figured out, which was that sometimes the right thing is just to reach over. She didn't learn that from her grandfather. She didn't learn it from her father either, which is one of the stranger facts I carry. Because Marcus held himself together the way I held myself together, carefully, privately, at a distance. He learned it from me. He learned to keep himself behind glass. And yet there is a 7-year-old girl who reaches for the hand of an old man at a memorial because she understands something about comfort that neither of us could have taught her. Maybe she got it from her grandmother. Eleanor had that quality, that ease with comfort. She could walk into a room and immediately understand what each person in it needed and move toward it. I envied that. I admired it, without knowing how to ask her to teach it to me, without knowing it was even something that could be taught. Maybe Senna got it from her mother. Maybe she got it from her own nature, from whatever is in a person before anyone gets to shape them. Maybe she will carry it through a life that started in loss and find it useful. I hope so. I hope she finds it useful. I hope Marcus knows his daughter. I sit here and I send that thought out like a radio signal. I hope Marcus, whoever he is now, whatever name he answers to in a house in New Mexico with a woman named Clara and an 18-month-old who has probably grown considerably since that photograph was taken, I hope he carries his daughter with him. I hope she is not something he has managed to set down. I hope she is the weight he cannot lose, that she follows him into the new life the way a voice follows you into a dream, persistent and familiar and finally inescapable. I hope it costs him something. I can admit that. I can admit that in the late night, in this chair, with no one listening who could be hurt by it. I hope it costs him something, because the only alternative is that he left a 7-year-old girl without a father, and it cost him nothing, and I cannot hold that possibility in the same mind as the boy who used to stand in my kitchen in the mornings and wait. I don't know what he was waiting for. I know now. I know the way I know things at 79 that I could not have understood at 35, which is to say I know them in my body, in my chest, in the place where the grief lives. He was waiting for me to turn toward him. He was standing next to me in the kitchen, waiting for me to notice that he was there and to say something that meant, I see you. Not I see your swim times. Not I see your report card. I see you. I see a whole person standing here who I am glad exists. I never said it. I am saying it now, which is the most useless possible time to say it. I am saying it to a dark window on a quiet street in a house that smells of old furniture and the particular emptiness of living alone. I am saying it to a man who is somewhere in New Mexico with a different name, and I do not know if the signal reaches. Marcus, I see you. I saw you at 5 years old in that water, crying for 30 seconds and then going. I saw you at 11, with your first ribbon, the way your whole body changed when they called your name. I saw you at 28, standing at your mother's funeral, with a drink in your hand and your face at the window, and I should have gone to you, and I did not go, and I am sorry. I am sorry in the way that old men are sorry, which is without the possibility of amendment, which is just the raw fact of it sitting in the chest. I should have gotten in the water. I should have made myself clumsy and uncertain and visible in my uncertainty. I should have let you see me reaching for things I couldn't hold. I should have told you, at some point in 43 years, that loving you was the thing I was surest of in my life, and the thing I did the worst at showing, and that the two facts together have been the defining contradiction of my existence, the thing that makes me both proud and ashamed when I think about who I have been. I should have called you after your mother died and said, I don't know how to do this without her, and I need your help. Not because I couldn't manage alone, because I could manage alone. That is the one thing I have always been able to do. But because asking for help is a form of love I never mastered, and it was not too late then. Even then, it was not too late. And you were right there in that room, and I chose the neighbor with the casserole. It is late. The tree is still there. The streetlight, the empty street. A car went by about an hour ago, and that has been it. The house makes its settling sounds, the particular creaks and shifts of an old house that has held a life in it for many years. I have been in this house for 41 years. Eleanor died here. Marcus grew up here. Every wall has a memory pressed against it like a handprint. I am going to go to Portland. I've decided that tonight, sitting here. I am going to go, and I am going to sit in that house, and I am going to hold Senna's hand, and I am going to look at whatever urn is on whatever shelf, and I am going to be present, which is something I was never quite able to be when it mattered, but which I believe I still owe. And I'm not going to tell what I know. I've decided that too. Not because it wouldn't matter, not because the truth has no value, but because Senna is 7 years old, and the truth would not give her a father back, and it would take away the only story she has. And Tamara, whatever she knows, whatever she chose, is that girl's mother, and she is managing as best she can in a situation that I do not fully understand. And Marcus, If he is watching, if there is some part of him that has stayed connected to the people he left, if he checks in from some quiet distance the way you check in on a life you've left, the way you check the weather in a city you used to live in, just to know, just to keep the thread, then I want him to know. I want him to know that I know he's alive. I want him to know that I found him and I chose to let him stay where he is, not because he doesn't matter, but because I finally learned the thing he needed me to learn, which is that sometimes love means stepping back from the edge without hollering. Sometimes love means trusting that the person in the water knows how to swim. I am tired. My back has gone stiff in this chair, and my eyes are heavy, and the streetlight outside has the slightly blurred quality it gets when I've been up too long. The tree is just the tree. But I keep sitting here, and I keep thinking, because there is more to say, and I'm not sure when I'll say it, if not now. There are very few people I can say any of this to. Raymond knows the broad outline, the shape of it, but not all the details, not the full confession. Denton is a professional. He held everything I told him at a professional distance, the way you hold something you are paid to hold, and I am glad for that distance, but it is also its own kind of loneliness, talking to a man who is listening because you are paying him. There is no one else. This is one of the slow losses of old age that people do not warn you about adequately. They warn you about the physical losses, the joints, the memory, the shortness of breath going upstairs. But they do not warn you that by the time you have lived long enough to understand your life clearly, most of the people you would tell it to are gone. Eleanor is gone. My sister is gone. The few men I was ever close to, close in the way men are close, which is side by side, looking at the same thing, rather than face to face, looking at each other, most of them are gone. I am left with myself, which is a fair punishment, all things considered. I think about a Christmas dinner 5 or 6 years ago, the last one before everything. Marcus was at this table. Tamara was at this table. Senna was small, 3 or 4, and she was sitting on a stack of books because she was too short for the regular chair, and we hadn't thought to bring the booster seat from Portland. She sat on those books and ate her food with the serious expression she always wore at meals, like eating was a task that required full concentration. I watched her from across the table, and I thought, there she is, the next thing forward. That is not something I would have thought when Marcus was small. When Marcus was small, I was too young and too anxious and too full of my father's ways to sit across a table and just feel gratitude. I was always counting something, assessing, measuring the distance between what was and what should be. But I had softened enough by the time Senna arrived to just look at her and feel, quietly and without commentary, something like simple love. I told Marcus she was wonderful, not in so many words, not in any words that would satisfy what I mean now. I said something like, she's a good one, as if Senna were a useful tool or a reliable piece of machinery, as if the warmth I felt had to be translated into the language of appraisal before I could let it out of my mouth. Marcus looked at me when I said it, and his face did something complicated and brief, something that was gone almost as quickly as it came, and he said, yeah, she really is. And then he passed the bread. I want to go back to that table. That is the constant, persistent wish of old age, I think. Not the dramatic moments, not the big scenes, just the ordinary table, just the ordinary meal. The chance to sit there again and do it right, which would mean saying the warm thing without encasing it in appraisal. Looking at my son and saying, without preamble, without condition, without the management and the maintenance, I am glad you're here. I am glad you exist. I am glad of the particular way you've moved through your life, the stubbornness and the grace of it. I am glad you learned to stay underwater a long time because it meant you came up for air stronger. Those are the things I should have said. They are not things I could have said then. That is also true, and I hold both truths at the same time because that is what old age requires. I could not have said them then because I did not have the language yet. The language comes slowly to men like me, men made in a certain way, by fathers made in a certain way, and by the time it arrives, the people who needed to hear it have often already arranged their lives around its absence. The poolside memories come back to me tonight more than usual. I have been thinking about a particular afternoon. Marcus was 16, maybe 17, already at the level where coaches were talking about college recruitment, about the future, about what his times meant in a larger context. He had just finished a hard practice, and he was sitting on the edge of the pool with his feet still in the water and his goggles hanging around his neck, and he was just sitting there, breathing, not performing, not preparing for the next thing, just sitting. I walked up and sat down next to him, on the tile, in my work clothes. I don't know what made me do it. It was not like me. We sat there for a few minutes and neither of us said anything, and it was not the managed silence of our phone calls or our Christmas dinners. It was a different kind of silence, the kind that has room in it, that is not trying to prevent something from being said, but is instead just resting between two people who are for the moment in the same place. He said after a while, "Do you ever get tired, Dad?" I said, "Sure." "Of what are you talking about?" He said, "Just tired." I said, "Yeah, sure I do." And that was all. He got up and went to get his bag, and I sat there on the tile in my work clothes, with my feet not in the water, just near it, and I thought about what he had asked me. Just tired. Just the general weight of a life being lived in the direction you've pointed it, whether or not that direction is right. The kind of tired that is not physical, the kind that means something more than needing sleep. I knew what he meant. I did not say that I knew what he meant. If I had said that, if I had said, "Yes, I know, I feel it too. I have felt it most of my life, and I do not know what to do with it either. But I am glad you named it." I think that would have been the moment. I think that might have been the thread I could have pulled that would have unraveled the distance between us. Not all at once, not dramatically, just a beginning. But I sat on the tile and said nothing more. And the moment passed the way all those moments passed, quietly and without announcement, and he picked up his bag, and I picked myself up off the tile, and we drove home in the car and talked about nothing in particular. I think about Denton's photograph, the way Marcus was looking at something to the left of the frame, the way his shoulders were down. I have spent so much time on those shoulders. The way they look in that photograph is the way they never quite looked at my table, at the pool, in the car. At my table, his shoulders were always slightly raised, slightly contracted, the way a person's shoulders get when they are in a space where they are loved but not comfortable, where love is present but expressed sideways, where warmth comes through the paying of bills and the fixing of gutters rather than through being looked at and seen. His shoulders are down in New Mexico. That has to mean something. I tell myself, it means something. Tell myself that somewhere in the ledger of what I gave him and what I failed to give him, there is this. I gave him enough to know that he deserved to have his shoulders down, even if he had to go all the way to New Mexico under a different name to find the place where that could happen. He knew it was something to look for. He did not accept the raised shoulders as permanent. He would not live his whole life contracted. That came from somewhere, maybe from Eleanor mostly. She had shoulders like water, completely at rest, moving only when moved. She gave him that sense that there was another way to live in your own body. But maybe some small thread of it came from me. Maybe in the spaces between the hollering, there was something he saw in his father that told him a man could be more than the management of himself. Maybe there was one moment I don't remember, one ordinary evening when my face was unguarded, and he caught the real expression before I had a chance to arrange it into something more presentable, and he filed it away. I hope so. I hold that hope carefully, without leaning on it too hard, because I know what I did and what I didn't do, and hope that is too heavy becomes the kind that excuses rather than acknowledges. I do not want to be the old man who rewrites his failures in the last chapter. I want to carry them correctly. I want to say, I failed him in these specific ways that I can name, and I also love him in ways I never named adequately. And both of those things are true, and neither one erases the other. The streetlight hums. I can hear it now that the night has gone deeper, that particular low hum of electricity in the late hours. Everything is so still that I can hear it. Eleanor used to say I could sleep through anything, but I would wake up for silence. She said it like a joke, but she meant it as an observation, the way she made most of her important observations, lightly, sideways, leaving you room to take it or leave it. She was right. The noise of the world is a kind of comfort to me. I can sleep through traffic, through rain, through the neighbors who used to have a dog that barked most of the night. What wakes me is the sudden absence of sound, the moment when even the small noises stop and the house becomes a held breath. That is when Marcus is most present, in the held breath, in the silence that follows something stopping. I have written him 2 letters. I wrote the first one in November, 3 weeks after Denton showed me the photograph. I sat at this table and I wrote it by hand, because typing felt too mechanical, too managerial, and I wanted it to be a thing made by my hands. I wrote several pages. I said most of what I have said tonight, and more. I said things I had no practice saying. I told him about the pool, and the car, and the Christmas dinner, and Senna's shoulders, which were his shoulders, which were down and easy in a way his never were at my table. I wrote, I know you are alive. I know where you are. I am not coming for you. This letter is not a demand or a summons. It is just a thing I needed to put on paper, whether or not you ever read it. I wrote, I should have gotten in the water. I wrote his name at the end, just his name. No close, no valediction. Because every valediction I tried, love from your father always, sincerely yours, they all felt dishonest or formal, or like I was ending the conversation rather than leaving it open. And I wanted to leave it open. I sealed the letter and I put it in a drawer. I did not send it. The second letter I wrote in January. That one I burned in the backyard on a cold morning, standing by the side of the house in my coat, watching the paper curl and go. That one I had intended to send. I had addressed the envelope. I had looked at the address for a long time, the street name in New Mexico, the other name he is going by now, a name I will not say even here, even in the private dark. And then I put it in the fire, because I understood, watching the flame take it, that the letter was for me and not for him, that what I wanted when I imagined him opening it was relief for myself, not anything useful to him. He does not need my confession. He made his own reckoning with me a long time ago. He had to. A man does not plan this carefully, does not build this elaborate and deliberate an exit without having done the work of reckoning with the people he is leaving. He sat with me. He sat with what I was to him. He reached a conclusion, and he lived with that conclusion long enough to act on it. Whatever the conclusion was, I do not get to revise it by writing letters. The letter in the drawer, the unburned one, I will leave there. Maybe someone will find it after I'm gone. Maybe it will reach him that way, second hand, after I'm no longer here to make it awkward. Maybe Raymond will know what to do with it. Raymond is a practical man with a good heart, and he knows enough of the story now that he would understand. Or maybe the letter will just stay in the drawer. That is also fine. There are things that are said only to the dark, and that is where they stay, held by the house, absorbed into the walls with everything else. This house knows more of my life than any person does. It knows the sounds I make when I cry alone. It knows the particular way I talk to Eleanor's photograph in the bedroom when I think I need to report something to her. It knows the nights like this one, when I am in the chair until 3 or 4 in the morning, working through something I cannot work through, and that sits no lighter at the end of it than at the beginning. Some things do not get lighter. Some things you carry, and they do not diminish. They become familiar. You learn the shape of them, the exact weight, which muscles to use. You find a way to move with them that is almost natural if you don't look too closely. But they are not light. They do not become light. Marcus, I say it into the room. I have done that on bad nights, said his name out loud in the empty room. Saying it changes nothing except that it makes him present in a small way, the way names can make people present. He is somewhere in New Mexico, in a house I have seen only from a distance in a photograph, and I am in a chair in a house that remembers him when he was 5 years old and crying at the edge of a pool. And between those two facts is 40-some years of a life lived mostly well and partially wrong, and the name is the only bridge between them that I have access to anymore. Marcus, my son. The one thing I made that I do not know how to hold and cannot set down. I think about him in his yard. I think about him in the morning, in whatever morning comes to New Mexico at this time of year, whether he stands with a cup of something and looks at the sky the way he used to look at the pool before he got in, that particular stillness, that gathering, the way he used to stand at the lane line with his goggles pushed up and his whole body collecting itself, becoming very quiet for a few seconds before the start. I used to watch that from the bleachers, and it was the one moment when I did not want to holler anything at him. It was the one moment when something in me understood that he had the thing, that he was entirely himself, that he required nothing from me except to be witnessed. I was not good at witnessing. I was good at evaluating. I was good at timing. I was good at driving him places and waiting in the car and paying the fees and making sure the gear was right and the schedule was managed. All of that I did. I would do it again. I would do it better, without the hollering, without the management. But I would do it again, and it was not nothing. It just was not enough. It was not the thing he needed, which was simpler and harder than any of it, which was just to be seen, to stand at the lane line and look up into the bleachers and find a face that was not measuring him but was just there, just present, just glad. He looked for that face. I have known that for a long time, and I have not been able to admit it until tonight. He looked for that face every time he stood at the lane line, and he found me instead. And what he found in my face was the thing I was trained to show, which was appraisal, expectation, the particular expression of a man who believes his love is best expressed as pressure, who believes that wanting more for his child and wanting his child are the same thing. They are not the same thing. I know that now, and I knew it before, and I could not change it. That is the thing about the patterns you inherit from your father. Knowing them does not free you from them. You can see them clearly, name them precisely, trace them back through the generations all the way to the tired man who came north from Alabama looking for work And knowing all of that still does not give you the muscles you never built. You cannot swim just because you understand water. I understand all of it now. I have all the language I never had, and no one left to say it to, or the one person left to say it to is in New Mexico with his shoulders down and his name changed, and the truest thing I can do for him at this point is leave him there. Leave him there. That is what love looks like for me right now. That is the only form I can give it that does not take something from him. I can't go back. I can't revise the pool, or the car, or the Christmas dinners, or the 11 minutes. I can't be in the kitchen on the mornings he stood next to me, waiting for me to turn. I can't get into the water, but I can stand at the edge and not holler. I can watch from here and let him move. He knows how to swim. I know that. I have always known that. It was the first thing I ever understood clearly about my son, that the water was his and he was the water's, that there was a competence and a peace in him there that had nothing to do with me except that I pointed him toward it once. I pointed him toward it. That was something. That is the last thing I'm going to let myself hold on to tonight. In the long accounting of what I gave and what I failed to give, in the full weight of the regret and the love and the absence of all the things I never said, I am going to hold on to that one small thing. I pointed him toward the water. He was 5 years old, and I carried him to the edge, and I believed, even then, that he could do it. There was something in me that saw who he was going to be, even that early, and I put him in the current, and I believed. He cried for 30 seconds, and then he swam. I am tired. My back has gone stiff in this chair, and my eyes are heavy, and the streetlight outside has the slightly blurred quality it gets when I've been up too long. The tree is just the tree. I'm not going to know what he's thinking when he looks east, whether he looks east at all, whether it costs him anything, the not knowing, whether some nights he also sits in a chair. I don't know. I'm not going to know. That is the particular thing about this chair, this window, this hour. It does not give you answers. It just holds you while you run out of questions, one by one, until there is only the streetlight and the bare branches and the hum and the house that knows everything and says nothing, the same as all the rest of us. Nothing is coming. I know that. But the sitting still feels important, the being awake while the world sleeps, the letting the grief and the love and the fury and the sorrow and the bone-deep regret all be in the same room at the same time without trying to make them into anything cleaner than they are. He is alive. My son is alive. In the place I keep that fact, the place it has lived since Denton told me, there is something that might be called gratitude, might be called peace, or might just be the quiet that comes when a man finally stops fighting the current and lets himself be carried. He learned that in the water. I don't know where I'll learn it. I'm still looking.